All right, so food transparency is one of the things that consumers are concerned with as they start to venture back into restaurants. Today, we're going to get a chance to talk to an expert just about that very topic. My name is Paul Barron, and this is the Barron Report. All right, so we want to break down really kind of where our food is coming from. And with me today, I've got the CEO of FoodID, a gentleman by the name of Kevin Lowe. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
All right, so Kevin, let's learn a little bit about FoodID and your mission, kind of how you guys got started. Where did you come from? Tell me a little bit about your backstory.
We don't know enough about what's in our food. And FoodID is a testing platform for food transparency and brand label claims and authenticating those claims specifically. We're a company based out here in the Bay Area in California. And, the company, we're frankly just a group of scientists, ranchers, and technologists. And the company was founded by two individuals. And, like a lot of people, one of the co-founders had tried to, was buying food from, his daughter has a lot of allergies, and he was buying food at a farmer's market and wanted to know what was in his food and what was driving sort of the allergies in his kid. And a lot of parents are kind of dealing with the same sets of things. And it occurred to him that, look, it is now technically possible to know what is in our food. The testing capabilities and the underlying technology capabilities are just dramatically different than they were 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
All right, so Kevin, obviously, when you look at farmers today, sourcing and traceability is a big deal. And I think that's one of the things that when you look at how food supply happens, how important is traceability as it comes to maybe a product like yours?
Look, that's what's. I'm floored. We're here in Silicon Valley, and we live in a world where we know what is going on in the world, every 5 or 10 milliseconds at this point. And yet, when I go to the supermarket and I pick up, whether it's a piece of meat, pork chops, I go down the vegetable aisle and I look at eggs, I look at, my groceries. I have no idea what's in my food, and that's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so I can definitely see that from a consumer's perspective, because if you look at where kind of food has evolved from, especially in the digital space, everything from Instagram to Twitter, Facebook posts, all of those things, I think we're moving past that point where food is kind of an art expression and more of, okay, where is my food coming from? Walk me through kind of how you guys engage, who are your customers, kind of share us a little bit about that.
Well, a couple things. So one, what makes us unique is that we've developed a testing platform, and the testing platform that we have is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, it is about 5 to 10 times more sensitive than other tests that are out there. Second, it works in near real time, which is a really, really important part of this. People in the industry have resisted and always, they've had this excuse where I can't test because of, complexity, cost, and speed. And frankly, for the first time, a lot of those issues are now removed. So you asked me about our customers. We work for retailers who have big brands out there and making claims around the authenticity of their food. And we help them verify their sources upstream. And so we test up and down the supply chains. We test at the source. We test in slaughterhouse facilities. We test at distribution centers. And what's really cool about our test was that it was initially designed for consumers to actually run the test themselves. It is that simple and easy to use. We don't have that test out in the market yet. We're working first with industry, and we're testing in, beef, pork, and chicken plants across the U.S. and in Canada right now. I will also say the second group that we're working with, we've gotten also some early, some certain suppliers that are going the extra mile to do everything the right way. And for them, they are, we're working and testing their products and then giving visibility to the consumers that they sell to. And they think that frankly is a big differentiator for them.
Yeah. All right, Kevin, so let's talk a little bit about kind of the test itself. When you look at the cornerstones of what you guys are doing, where does the test start to drill down and kind of develop things like authenticity, or does it? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that we're doing right now, our first product is out there testing for antibiotics in meat. And I don't know if you knew this, but, about 70% of our antibiotics, that are consumed are actually used for livestock production. And antibiotic free is a pretty important claim for a lot of consumers today. And it's important for a variety of reasons, right? I think
Right.
increasingly people, for personal health, you have a lot of consumers that care about their gut biomes, for example. And frankly, if you care about your
Yep.
gut biome, please don't eat sub-therapeutic doses of antibiotics in your food, right? You're just blowing away your entire biome. People care about this issue because of the, superbug, antibiotic resistant superbugs that are out there. And this
Yep.
is sort of really pronounced in the current pandemic that we're living with, right? These sort of viral and bacterial pathogens are really problematic. And maybe the third reason is for environmental reasons. A lot of people care about, you know, livestock practices. And the frank reality is that you can't raise animals in the current industrial model without dosing them prophylactically with
Right.
antibiotics. And that is actually
Yeah.
a big misconception. Just to be really clear, Bill has been very public about, the importance of therapeutic treatments for animals when they get sick. And that's what most people envision when you talk about antibiotics in food. That's not true at all. We're testing for 95% of the drugs that are administered prophylactically in feed and water. And that's the problem that we're trying to attack.
All right, so you say consumer tests. I'm kind of curious, if I were to get, say, a chicken salad from a local restaurant, would I be able to perform a test and actually see if that is either hormone-free or antibiotic-free right there at that time?
Yeah, you can. That was the design principle of the test. And when you see that, when we use our test today, it literally is designed for consumers to use. Look, we've just found that our objective is to help. Our objective is to sort of, we would like to work with industry and help them sort of, quote unquote, clean up the situation, if you will. So we're kind of starting there.
All right, so it seems like you guys are kind of like the food police. So I'm kind of curious, have you been in process where maybe you have actually circumvented or come in and been able to save a situation happening before it actually became a big problem for a company? Has that ever occurred?
Yeah, and that's exactly the point, I think. Paul, you're exactly right. I think, if I'm a consumer, and I've actually had the situation happen when we've been doing a lot of early beta testing. If I'm testing a piece of meat, I'm eating a steak and I'm testing it, and it's positive, like that doesn't solve the problem. What am I going to do? I'm going to right.
Yeah.
And so the right answer is to address the issues upstream, and more importantly, to help people root out the root cause of some of the issues that we're finding. And I think, to your point, yes. There are a lot of retailers out there that have built brands around the authenticity of their food. Consumers pay more money for it because it's important to them. And, what you realize, and this is something that I always find fascinating, is we had done a bunch of surveys late last year. And especially, there's no data behind the brand label claims that are out there. And when people go down an aisle in a grocery store and they see, I counted 27 labels on products last time I was there at the market. There's no data behind any of these. These are based on affidavits that are signed by the suppliers. And, so most people are surprised, like, oh, wait, I thought there was actual testing data behind this. And then the second thing people assume is that someone's testing. And if there's anything we've learned from the current situation is test. If you don't test, you're not going to find anything. And that's the surprising part about the current world that we're living in. So, and the great news is it's actually now feasible and possible to test very, very large samples of products that are out there, and to do it at line speeds, which has been the big concern from industry.
Very cool. All right, so Kevin, when you look at consumers and kind of where their importance levels are, especially around food sourcing today, kind of explain where the demand is coming from, because we're seeing it from all over the place, from things like, it used to be the Instagram post and the Facebook post, Twitter post, food is art kind of thing, but now it's getting more serious. They really want to know where this stuff's coming from.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, consumers care for three reasons, right? Their personal health. People care about antibiotic resistance and literally the macro problems that implies. And then third, for environmental reasons. And so it's a big issue for consumers these days, and they're passionate about it. And I think when you think about consumers who care, once consumers are really anchored in on this issue specifically, they want to buy meat products that are antibiotic free and raised in a manner that's consistent with that. Now all of a sudden we find that restaurants and retailers care. You have guys and gals that have built big brands around the fact that they're serving authentic food. And then you have a handful of the suppliers that are doing it that are going the extra mile, doing it the right way, and they really care. And frankly, they're pissed off because of the greenwashing that's going on here, right?
Right.
And that's a phenomenon that we're seeing. Everybody's kind of jumping on the bandwagon, and everybody in the industry knows that, hey, so and so down the street is now selling this product that's labeled and marketed as a particular, in a particular way, and they know that that's inconsistent with what they see day to day, and so we're seeing this dynamic, and I think it really starts with the consumers and that consumer trend. And I think one of the things that we were surprised by is we did a bunch of surveys and focus groups, in the second half of last year, and when you get people together in rooms, it's fascinating. One, people assume that there's data behind the brand label claims that you see.
Okay.
And me personally, when I go to a grocery store, last time I went, I counted 27 different label claims, right? And literally, I asked an analyst to draw me a Venn diagram, and this guy went to MIT, right? He couldn't get the Venn diagrams to fit in because they're really confusing right now. And people, and so the first thing that I found was interesting was people assume there's data behind these claims, and there's not. These are affidavit-backed claims that come from the supplier. And then secondly, people assume that someone's testing.
Right.
And the reality is nobody's testing. The USDA does a very, very small amount of testing, and they're testing for very different things. They're testing for the bar that they're using is just very different than the bar that you see in organic or antibiotic free. They're testing for, are the drug levels in this meat, quote unquote, safe for consumers to eat? And it's a very different bar, right, than the bar that is used at, in these organic labels. So it's a shock. It's really funny when you see people's reaction to it, because they're like, wait a minute, how can this be?
Right. This kind of leans into a topic we're looking to cover here on the Barron Report, and that is food fraud. The amount of food fraud that's taking place here, not only in the United States, but globally, is astronomical. I was surprised in the research that I was doing of how rampant it really is in the industry. So basically, your potential test could kind of hold them to the fire in terms. Does it go down to the level of sourcing, or is it primarily you're looking for trace elements that can identify whether or not something's been used in the production of that food?
Yeah, what we're doing is we're testing for drug compounds that are in your meat. And literally they are, and the question is, we're testing them at the levels that are able to screen out animals that were actively fed these drugs in their lifetime, versus, animals that weren't. And that is the key part of this. And the key, as I mentioned earlier, was that, the reason why this doesn't exist today is there's not a lot of testing, is because of the speed, complexity, and cost associated with doing it today. And that's been the excuse that people have used. And frankly, our view is that right now and today going forward, there is no excuse. The technologies are just, the technologies now exist that it is possible to know what's in your food. And our view is that there are a group of customers out there that care deeply about this, and they want to know, and they're willing, and they're the ones paying a big premium to know and to buy food that's consistent with what they're looking for.
Right. So, I can't wait to use your product to start testing myself for this very purpose. All right, so let's talk about advancements in the industry. When you look at traceability, the ability to be able to really get into identify things, are there some potential new tracks that FoodID could be going down, to go into other food properties, all the way down to maybe even sourcing elements? Where are you going with that kind of tech?
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think a part of it is there are two aspects of this thing. Well, one is sort of the technology and the technology platform itself. And then second are the compounds and the markers that we're testing for. So yeah, we have a pretty, we have an aggressive roadmap focused on not just meat, but, expanding into seafood and, vegetables. And really, I think we're focused on helping people identify today it's drug compounds, pesticides, pollutants, and other adulterants in your food. And I think that's really our focal point. To your point broadly about traceability, I think that's something that I think traceability solutions have been talked about for the last decade plus.
Exactly.
And I think what's interesting here is that I think it needs to be more than just the marketing materials, right? Most of the things I see today are things like, oh, this product was raised or was farmed or ranched by this individual in that location. And the supply chains, to your point, are pretty complicated. And so, you either get marketing, which I think is important, but you get either just marketing and then you get a logistics report. And I think our view is that, look, that capability should also include food attributes, right? And it attributes like, are there pollutants, adulterants, drug compounds in your food? And then you can certainly imagine people looking at adding nutritional content and other attributes of that product to that same traceability capability or trace capability. And so if you ask me where I think the future is going, I think the future is people want to see the food from the source to their plate, and they're going to want to see attributes alongside that. And so we're focused on that attribute capability.
So have you guys seen any studies that kind of show the cause and effect of a scenario where we implement testing at this phase? What does it have in terms of a cause and effect relationship to society and or to companies that are selling these products over the next decade, next 2 decades? What do you think there?
I think we're pretty early in this still. I think that, I think for, at least on our side, where we're looking at testing for drug compounds and the like, I think we're going from a world where nobody's doing it. The label claims read and imply that somebody's actually testing for performance, not just sort of grading you based on effort, right? Oh, this person has a policy and we're rating that policy, and that policy, it's possible to test for performance. We should evaluate both effort and performance. And so I think from our standpoint, we're kind of going from a world where it wasn't possible to know really. If you did want to know, I mean, these tests that are run in these central labs take 3 to 4 days now. They cost $1,000 a test, and that's not, you're not going to do that. That's not a mainstream solution. So, I think that over the next 3 to 5 years, and people will start doing a lot more testing of their food. And you asked about the societal impact of this thing. I think we're going from the incentives are pretty misaligned today.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's pretty easy.
Unfortunately. Saying unfortunately, you're exactly right.
Yeah, and look, I have Bill, obviously, the co-founder of the company, Bill Nyman, does this, and I've had a chance to spend a lot of time with ranchers and farmers. I understand the profit motives and the incentives. Yeah. If an animal gets sick, I'm going to treat that animal, and if I treat that animal, I no longer can represent that animal as organic or antibiotic free, never ever antibiotic free, and man, those incentives are rough when times are tough out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Unfortunately, it's the integrity of food really does matter. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the good thing is that you guys are doing some very great work to kind of get the ball rolling in the right direction. I think especially as consumers are starting to demand this of their food suppliers, their restaurants, et cetera, especially in times like this. Let me talk to you about consumer confidence, because that's one that I think as consumers start to discover these things, they start to lose confidence in our food system, which they've started to lose confidence in things like, sanitation and other things that, when you go out and dine out. Where do you think that's going to stop? And do you feel like we're going to need a lot more openness and transparency in the testing process or vehicles that can kind of solve these problems in the future? It's funny, when we did a survey, the levels of trust are at an all-time low. Not just in society, we see that in society overall, but relative to food, especially the millennial and Gen Z segments of the market, they just don't trust the big brands anymore, and that any goodwill that was left is kind of evaporated at this point. And so, the question for a lot of the big brands, how are you going to build trust? And our one way to do it, and there are other ways you could do it. You could spend a ton of money on marketing for sure, but I think a very simple approach would be just be more be transparent. And I think that again, I go back to the thing. We've learned from this experience. If you don't test, you're not going to find anything. And so we think testing is an obvious
no-brainer. There are many other techniques that you can do to start rebuilding the trust with the consumers. But I do think it needs to happen, and it's really, really pronounced with the younger generations, especially. I mean, it was really funny. I mean, when you look these people in the face and you tell them for the first time, hey, this label claim, there's no data behind it. It's an affidavit-backed claim, and people are shocked and aghast because they just assume that there's a lot of testing going on.
Yeah, for sure. Do you see this as becoming maybe a trend where people are going to go back to the 1960s and 1950s where we grew our own food? I mean, do you see that kind of societal impact level?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see how much. I think we'll see how the post-pandemic, which habits actually stick around or post-pandemic.
Yeah.
But look, I think at the end of the day, I think that our view is that we can help the meat industry first and foremost, help them rebuild trust and help build a new segment of the market and or a segment of the market, where people are buying organic and buying antibiotic free. And just to step back on this thing, these issues and these attributes really matter to the consumers. We're, antibiotic free and animal welfare related claims are a big part of what's driving the premium end of the market. And to your point, when you dig in on it, it's, we just want to make sure and help people verify that's true. And
it's kind of the no-brainer part. Yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer, which I'm very surprised and continue am surprised at some of the things that are happening out there. Kevin, it's been great chatting with you. I can't wait to see what you guys are up to, and awesome to have Bill Nyman involved with you. I think you guys are on the right track there. Yeah, I mean, Bill's been an activist for clean food for 40 years, and we're happy to kind of continue building on that legacy. Very cool. Thank you for stopping in on the show today. Thank you so much for having us. Yep. Bye-bye. All right, so hey, you guys are listening in maybe over on Spotify or on iTunes. Of course, drop us a rating. That's how we kind of get feedback from our audience, and it's also a way that you can communicate whether or not you like a topic or whether you would like to see more of something in maybe this direction, whether it's down food safety or food fraud, those kind of things that we're starting to cover here on the Barron Report, and looking to dive further into the business of food. So if you have some ideas, make sure and send them to us at producer@foodabletv.com. And also you can hit me up on Twitter, which is @PaulBarron. We will catch you guys on the next Barron Report.